Hello, YouTuber-san, friend-san, compatriot-san, debt slave-sans, peasant-sans, vassal-sans. I am a useful idiot. Today I'd like to talk about Japan. And Japan is living on borrowed time. Japan has been living on borrowed time for quite a long time. And it's finally catching up to them. And the reasons why I'm saying this are several. And one is that their economy looks like it's going into free fall right now. Their third quarter numbers just came out, and their economy shrank by 3.5% annualized. They have their current account has turned negative for the first time in 30 years. They have a huge trade deficit, and the yen has been depreciating, and they have steep sales declines, of course, across the Eurozone and China. And that will continue to happen as the rest of the world economy goes into contraction as well. Their trade deficit has hit a record high. And of course, everyone knows that they have their debt is at 235% of their GDP. They are $12.5 trillion in debt. And if interest rates rose merely 2%, their national debt would consume 100% of their Japanese tax revenue. And so that's pretty startling. And we've seen all these contractions in the Japanese economy for quite some time now, since the collapse of 2008. They've been feeling the ramifications of that. And then they've had the same problems. Their big banks have had a lot of the same problems as U.S. and Eurozone banks, riddled with fraud and corruption, speculation, bad investments. And of course, Japan is the poster child for the speculative stock market bubble collapse. And they have had their proverbial lost decade, which has slowly turned into 2 lost decades. And these similarities between the United States and Japan are kind of eerie at times. And they go back a little further than people think. And one example of that is the industrial powerhouse that Japan became building up their empire and their war machine in the 20s and 30s. And the U.S., of course, did the same thing. We have built our empire and built an economic powerhouse out of building a vast military machine. And then at the end of World War II, Japan, of course, becomes a economic powerhouse as they reconstruct and move into all the new technologies and the new economy of the post-war world in the 50s. Very profitable for everyone concerned. And Japan was able to have an economic miracle, much like post-war Germany, because they didn't have to funnel their resources, money, into building a vast army and military machine again. So not really a military, or not really an economic miracle when you don't have to spend a lot of money on the military. And then, of course, the United States had a huge economic boom in the post-war period, rebuilding countries like Japan and Germany, being the only country left standing with a huge economy that needed to transition from a war economy to a peace economy. And we found it very profitable to rebuild Japan and Germany in our own image, and with a Western democratic capitalist model. And and another thing that was common to both the Japanese post-war economy and the U.S. post-war economy was that there was plenty of money around for credit loans, and credit loans were encouraged because Japanese citizens, like American citizens, were encouraged to save. And, of course, Americans were eager to save after being deprived during the Depression and World War II, and Japan as well. They'd been in war for several decades. So there was lots of new credit loans, which eased borrowing conditions, and they ran large trade surpluses, and the value of the currency appreciated against other currencies. It encouraged local investment. Local product prices went down. Financial assets became lucrative, and that's the same story in the U.S. and the United States. And then at some point, the financial industry and, of course, the corporate growth all adds up to a lot of easy money and rampant speculation. And of course, we have the central bank in the United States and the central bank and the Bank of Japan in Japan, who eased money conditions, and this encouraged rampant speculation. We ended up with the huge real estate bubble. And Japan already went through this. They had an inflated stock market and an inflated real estate market, and it crashed. And it crashed because of the bubble is fueled by easy money and rampant speculation, just like here in the U.S. And then this bubble crashed, and that is much like here in the U.S. And then they ended up having decades of zero interest rates from the central bank and QE, quantitative easing, and liquidity injections year after year after year after year, and they continue to go on as we speak, and more stimulus packages. And there was even a statement recently that Bank of Japan might be moving the same direction as Ben Bernanke and their equivalents in the Eurozone, and just going into permanent quantitative easing, just continuing to inject money into these banks. And that brings me to the next part of the story, where Japan is living on borrowed time, because the Bank of International Settlements just revealed the fact that the holdings of Japanese government bonds by Japan's banks equals 900% of their Tier 1 capital. That's a staggering amount, and it reveals just how bad things are, and also this strange symbiotic relationship we're seeing globally since the collapse, and that is broke banks propping up broke governments, propping up broke banks, propping up broke governments. So holdings of Japanese government bonds by Japan's banks equals 900% of their tier capital. That compares to only 25% for UK banks' exposure to gilts. And I don't have the exact figures for the United States, but I know that last year the Federal Reserve was the only buyer for, or was buying 60 to 70% of all U.S. Treasuries. So the figures may be comparable. But going back to Japan, the Bank of Tokyo Mitsubishi alone holds $485 billion in government bonds, and admit they have no exit strategy. And I think a lot of people in Japan are not that worried about it, because it's very insulated. 90% of all the Japanese government bonds are held domestically, either by corporate or retail customers. But still, this is very precarious, because Japan is in a situation where it has 2.5 times more debt than the U.S. and the UK, and the only people holding up the government and the banks are the government and the banks. And sooner or later, this will have to catch up with it. And of course, we've seen all the corporate bailouts of the auto companies and the nuclear companies, and their nuclear industries shut down for the time being, so they're relying on a lot of spending on energy needs right now. And then, of course, the entire population is being irradiated still by the catastrophe and the ongoing catastrophe at Fukushima. So things are very precarious for Japan right now, and wouldn't take much to push them over another shock. So I can only offer my sympathy, and just wait and see what happens in Japan as these things unfold. But those are some pretty shocking numbers, and Japan is now going in contraction, something we're not used to seeing in our lifetimes, as Japan's economy has been completely resilient. And in fact, another thing that compares with America is their working population is aging and will be going into the entitlement system. And that's something they have in common with the United States, and that will have an economic impact, as well as the fact that Japan is considering rearming, and of course that could inject a lot of life into their economy if Japan does decide to rearm, and it could also inject money into the United States as well. So anyway, Japan is living on borrowed time, and we shall see what happens in the end. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.